Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first off-the-record close call. This isn't a live chat. This is a chat that is between myself and a member of the officiating fraternity from throughout the world. And this afternoon we have James Tredwell, former England cricketer, former Kent county captain, and former England captain, the only undefeated England men's cricket captain of all time. James, I'll let you explain that a little bit more, but lovely to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, everyone at Close Call or wherever you're watching this from. But an interesting story, really. I had the honour of being given the captaincy for England for a T20 at the Oval, which obviously amazing. One game, rained off after 2 balls, having lost the toss. We were 4 for 1, I think. So, illustrious captaincy career, but one that I'll certainly cherish.
Well, great to have you here, James, and thanks for taking part. Now, you were just talking about your playing career. What made you decide to go from playing into umpiring? What was the motivator there?
Well, several things, really. I think if you'd have asked me sort of 5 or 6 years before I finished whether I wanted to be umpire, I might have had a different answer. But having sort of come to that sort of back end of my career and started to think, what next, sort of thing. I certainly wanted to stay in the game in one way, shape, or form, and currently that is still sort of two-pronged. I'm still sort of doing a fair bit of coaching alongside the umpiring, and they sort of mould quite nicely together at the moment. In that, a lot of coaching is through the winter, and then I'm at a school, Eastbourne College in Sussex, so a lot of that's through the winter and through the school term. But it still allows me time during the summer months to then give umpiring a go. And at the moment, I'm thoroughly enjoying the umpiring and the coaching. I think umpiring is probably the first option, but at the moment, coaching has helped paying the bills, as we say. So at the moment, I'm doing both, but my goal was to stay in the game in one way, shape, or form. And like I say, sort of 4 or 5 years before I came to an end, probably after I finished playing for England, started chatting to a few umpires around the county scene, and virtually everyone I spoke to sort of said, "Just give it a go." And they all sort of recognised some of my temperament traits, I guess, that might sit quite nicely as being an umpire. So I thought, well, come on then, we'll give it a go.
Yes, I remember one of those conversations well at Billericay when you were playing for Kent CCC. Yes, it was a very cold day, I seem to remember, but it certainly kept me entertained. Neil Robson, who's on the group, asked, when you were doing your umpires course, how much did you realise that you didn't know?
A fair bit. Well, I think to be honest, I was probably having loved the game all my life, probably been a bit. The word badger comes into it, but that's probably quite a good one. I was probably better than some players in that regard, in that, I probably did sort of take note of situations when they occurred and sort of tended to remember them. It always used to annoy me, my fellow players asking me, when's lunch? Or, those little things about like more playing conditions, I guess, as well as the laws. But there were things that I wasn't as probably up to scratch as I now know I need to be as an umpire. And there's still been situations in the last year or two where I now feel as though I know them, but you still get that moment where you think, when you've not encountered that situation before, and then it's like, right, which is actually a really nice situation. It brings back those butterflies that sort of you remember from your early playing days, those sort of that moment, right, and you've got to pull it out of the back of your brain somewhere and act in the according fashion. So at the moment, that's the sort of path I'm on, really, I guess, and I'm sure we've all been through that as umpires, of when you have those situations where you might not have seen it for 3 years, 5 years, and then bang, and you've got to react in the right way. And I guess that's the path that I'm on at the moment. And I'm probably less along the path as someone like yourself who's been doing it for however many years.
Eons. Definitely eons. But talking about that, do you feel that there's an umpiring instinct in that you know that there's something wrong, you know you have to do something about it, but you're not quite sure? But it's that moment where you've got to rely on your knowledge of the laws and the playing conditions, to whatever extent that might be, to come to
Absolutely.
a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certain situations, like say, you can see happening minutes, overs before they actually do. I had one, a very basic example last year in a national counties match, Cheshire versus Oxfordshire. The ball went down to fine leg off a spinner, sort of quite fine. The keeper threw his glove off and chased after the ball, and you just see it happening. The captain, who was filming that slip, picked up the glove. And so I was looking at my partner, and you could see it transpiring. And sure enough, the ball came in and he caught the ball. And, but you do have that split second if you're reading the game, just to give yourself a chance to give you that extra couple of seconds to think, don't you? But it's still that moment of, have I got it right? Am I reacting in the right way? And that's where you need to work with your partner, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've touched on a very important point there, in that when you're on song and you're with a colleague, you both look at each other in that exact moment, and there's that moment of telepathy where you're both thinking exactly the same thing, and then you may come together 3 overs later and go, were you thinking one? Yes, absolutely. We're going to, and it's just that it reaffirms what you already know, but it embeds it as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think this period now, I've been sort of heading the law book. I'm sure a lot of us have, in terms of just swatting up on what we already know potentially, but it's a big old book, isn't it? And to be able to just call on every part of that at any moment of the day, that takes quite a lot of knowledge and memory. And you do need a trigger sometimes to just flick that switch in your head to go, oh yeah, it's that one.
Yeah.
Or I have to do this process, as opposed to knowing it all inside out every minute of every day. I think that's quite difficult.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And you're also talking in that scenario about a spin bowler. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have difficulty picking up the spin. Now, as an umpire and a former spin bowler for England, a very successful one, what are you looking for when you're stood at the non-striker's end and you're looking down that 22 yards? What is it that you're looking for? And do you think that your experience as an international spinner gives you an advantage?
I think it probably does, to a point. I think the first thing you're looking at is the pitch. What is it offering in terms of bounce? I think that's quite a big one in terms of how high it's bouncing. If it's hitting a knee roll and a forward defensive shot, is that going over the top? And that's sometimes missed out, I think. Other wickets that are very low it might hit in the same place, but because of the trajectory of the bounce, after the bounce, it's still going to hit the stump. So that's probably the first thing in terms of the bounce of the pitch, obviously the degree of turn. But then also, I think you're looking at a build-up of time. So I, as an off-spin bowler, I would try and set people up to get them over there, especially if it's on a big turning pitch. I'm looking to bowl 3 overs maybe at a batter where I'm really trying to spin it hard, and then get the one that doesn't quite turn so much and pitch a little bit straighter. But that might take me 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 overs to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think as an umpire, if you can sort of read what the bowler's trying to do in terms of a game plan, you sort of get that sense of, oh, hang on a minute, he's trying to do this or do that. Even with the field settings, where they're trying to get the batter to hit. Why are they blocking off that area? Oh, hang on, he trying to get him to sweep. He's lift open the sweep shot, and oh, hang on, there's something going on. You still got to make that decision when it comes, because you can have it in your head. Or he's trying to do this, and you don't want to get carried away with, oh, well done, and sort of you've still got to make the call at the point, haven't you?
Yeah.
But I think having that sense of what's going on in the wider game is not just for spin bowlers. I think for all types of bowlers, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. One question that came in from Will Houston, who's part of the close call, was going along those lines to a certain extent. In that, do you find that players that you've played against, that you are now potentially officiating, give you less problems because they know the way that your mind works? They know that you were a former international player.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the cricket I've umpired in to date has been relatively local to me. So a lot of, whether that's league cricket, sort of recreational cricket, county second 11, it's all been sort of Kent area.
Yeah.
I've since had a few games, sort of national counties and second 11s further away, but certainly those I found them quite tough in the second 11 games with Kent. I mean, several of the players that I played with for 6, 7, 8 years, and you stood at square leg, and you've got a lad that 2 years ago I was sharing a dressing room with, and you're trying to separate that sort of situation while still concentrating on a run out or whatever in a one-day game, and however easy it might be to then. So one of the chaps that I stood with in one of those games said, "Oh, you've got to get out of those situations. You've got to, go to the other side or whatever to remove yourself." But I go over there, and there's another bloke that I've so there's no getting away, and there's and that's where the process side of things comes into it, I guess, in terms of trying to go through the rituals of how you do each ball. But I've found those situations a little bit tough in trying to separate those relationships.
Yeah.
Have I been? Perhaps it is a little bit easier. I don't know. I'd like to think the way that I've conducted myself in those environments has helped as well. I haven't had many issues in any of the games I've done. Whether that's down to who I am, in terms of people knowing me as such, I don't know. Or is that how I've actually conducted the act of umpiring? I wouldn't know. But I think the next test for me is that moving further afield, away from people that perhaps do know me as much.
Yeah.
And that will come with time, I guess, the more I do.
Yeah. Following on from that, Gareth Dowson has asked, what have you found the biggest difference between playing and umpiring, both mentally and physically?
Well, I guess physically you don't quite have those longer, intense periods, I guess. So if you're batting, for instance, in a one-day game, you're not running between the wickets.
Yeah.
Potentially three or four threes in an over, are you? I mean, it's not quite as intense physically, but the mental strain I've found is probably as hard.
Yeah.
And it's probably slightly different. I liken it to, one of the reasons why I feel as though I am reasonably suited to umpiring is that I fielded slip most of my career. And I sort of liken it a little bit to that, in that you've got those up and down periods of switching on, switching off, and trying to sort of refresh between balls and then back on. And then you're running between ends. And that's probably, it's very similar. You stood pretty much in the same spot. You might have to go 6 hours where nothing happens, but you've got to be switched on every single ball in case there's that one moment. So I think there's big sort of links to playing and umpiring. I think that the challenge is the mental one. So I've certainly come off the field during games, after day one of a multi-day game, completely knackered, because that mental, just being on it all the time, especially if there's lots going on, is quite a tough one. Slightly different to playing because again you're reacting to the ball and doing what you've got to do. Whereas umpiring, you've got to take absolutely everything in.
Yeah. Okay. I read an interesting quote of yours, and I hope I'm not misquoting here, but I think it sums up what we've been talking about. Now, I think it's very appropriate for any official in any sport, in that you said, and I quote, "You have to be who you are, and while that can change over time, you have to stay true to yourself, as that gives you a better chance of performing." And I think that just totally sums up what we've been talking about effectively, in that you have to be honest, not just with the players and your colleague, but also yourself. So that
definitely, and I think that quote came sort of at the back end of my playing career.
Yeah.
About my playing. I always got, when I was away on tour, I used to say at home here I grow a bit of my own fruit and veg. It's a bit of a hobby, and you can imagine as a sort of late 20-year-old going away on tour with a lot of other young blokes, you're talking about your cabbages at home or whatever. I've got a bit of stick for that, and probably rightly so. But I maintain that. I really enjoyed that. It was actually a release for me during my sort of in between days or games. Gave me a chance to remove myself from cricket,
Yeah.
And but I got a bit of stick for that. But I didn't. I still enjoy it, and I will still enjoying it, and I've remained down that road. And there was actually a chat with Gunnar in Gould again, along those lines of the chat we had in terms of, umpiring, what do you reckon, this, that and the other. And that was the one bit of advice that he gave me is, firstly, give it a go. I think, it'd be a really good thing. If you do it, he said, be yourself. That was I'm going to continue trying to do that, yes, do it as you need to do it in terms of the process and all that kind of stuff, but you've got to be yourself. Otherwise, it takes even more energy out of what you're doing day in, day out, trying to put on an act. And as we know, it's hard enough anyway without having to act through it as well.
No, I think you're completely right. And I think, James, that is a perfect place for us to end. And the moral of this conversation, I think, is everyone on the close call, be yourself. James, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Cheers. Thanks a lot.